Finance, following a formal welcome to Jadine and to Councillor Mark. You really are members of this committee now, so I'm looking forward to lots of participation during the course of today's meeting. Apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Bunting and a partial apology from Mayor Southgate. Are there any other apologies? All right, I'll move apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Dave. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against?
Carried unanimously.
Confirmation of the agenda. The agenda is as pretty much as in the order of diligent and the order of the run sheet. I'll move that the agenda. Thank you. Those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, no declarations of interest. Public forum. We have nobody in the public forum today. So let's move to item 5, confirmation of the Finance Committee open minutes of the 29th of March. I'll move those as a true and correct record. Thank you, Councillor Maxine. Is there any discussion arising from the minutes? Any points of clarification? Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against?
Carried unanimously.
All right, let's move now to item 6, which is the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report. And that is on page 12. And welcome Ian to speak to his report.
Good morning, Councillor Pascoe. Good morning, councillors. Here to present the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report for the 9 months ended 31st of March 2022. Focus on 4 key areas within the report, which is the actual result for the period, budget changes that we're proposing through this report, an update on our work in progress, and overview of project and program risks that have been identified and bring to the attention of the committee. As at the 31st of March, the 9-month result, Council have spent $175.7 million with 64.1 in associated revenue. As I've said consistently over the last few meetings, we look at that 175.7 against where we were last year as a comparison. We are ahead by about 17 million. There's a reference in paragraph 24 to that, and that's again just that indicator of the uplift in the capital program and the fact that we are delivering a bigger and better program year on year. In terms of moving on to budget changes, at this point I'll just make specific reference. I'm going to reference to attachment 2 in the report, which is the table in the landscape, which I seem to have lost. It'll be behind all this bits of paper. So sorry, councillors. It's that one there. It's attachment 2. Just taking you through because it gives you both the changes I'm talking about today, but also looks at all the historic changes since the beginning of the financial year. So we have a look at that. Our overall budget at the last meeting was we were spending $308.4 million, and at this meeting, and this report we're dropping that down. That reduces down to $275 million. Look, that is predominantly due to the fact that we are increasing projected deferrals at this point in time, and those deferrals have increased by $33 million since the previous report, and that's taking our annual deferrals as at the 9-month result to $123.7 million. And then the next question, I think, which is very important, is, and we're also increasing our year-end projection now, and we now believe that the year-end deferrals come 30th of June are likely to sit between 135 and 145. And if I to be quite blunt with you today, I would expect that the 145 is more realistic than 135. So we're looking at the outer end of that parameter in terms of the year-end deferrals. What I did want to say, and we said it briefly in the report, is that, look, under the direction of our Portfolio Management Office, through Sarah Seal and through our General Manager, we have been holding a series of discussions, and we continue to have those, trying to understand what is driving our deferrals in the current environment, so that we can better understand those. That'll help us with better planning, better reporting here, and understanding what we need to do. Look, we will report back, but I just wanted to give you a high-level indication now of some of the key drivers that have been identified. Clearly, COVID has been one of them in relation to supply issues and the alert levels. We've also got, and it's covered in the portfolio risk, we've also got the current situation with Omicron, where we're getting a lot of workers, both internally, both staff, but outside consultancy and our contractors, who are having to, productivity is slowing down due to the isolation rules. Look, we've had a lot of demand over the last little while from central government as staff are involved in working through water reform, various other government policies, the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund as well, which has had an impact. Look, we've got the one that's been around for quite some time. We continue to be dependent on third parties to make progress in some cases. And we have to work closely with them to get the best outcome from council. We've identified that funding, particularly through NZTA or Wakatahi, sometimes needs to be secured before projects can be given a green light to move forward, and that can hamper delivery. We're currently in a situation where there really is just a general skills shortage, and there's a talent war, as we've written, going on at the moment, trying to get staff on either in-house or through the consultancy market. The other thing is, I think it's important to just acknowledge that, look, we're City Council, very complex business. A lot of the projects we're dealing are complex and have a lot of complexity sitting behind them, particularly when you start to apply national policies that come into place recently, like the freshwater one, and also having to be far more cognizant of some of the demands through the private development agreements that we have with the development market, ensuring that the projects and the program we're delivering is fit for purpose and meets the needs of the community and the ratepayer. So look, that was just really, sorry, that was literally, I had no intention of actually speaking to that this morning, but I just thought, given that we had that information here, I'll just give you an insight into some of that. But as I say, we'll work through something more comprehensive and come back to this chamber at some stage in the near future with a more comprehensive response to that, because I'm sure that would be well appreciated. If I just then move on off that topic, work in progress. We know work in progress is high for the organisation, and consistently we talk about not focusing on work in progress. Rather, we focus on what is the outstanding work in progress, i.e. that is the projects that have been completed but are still sitting in progress and have not been capitalised. Look, we are starting to see an improvement in that number. In this report here, it's dropping from the previous report. It's now sitting at approximately about 113 million. It was previously about 126. We're constantly looking at where we might end up for year end. I'm confident that number will significantly reduce by the time we get to 30th of June. Case in point, there is a couple of substantial projects within that balance of outstanding, one being the Rotokauri Transport Hub assets and one being the Ihalpa Roundabout, which are nearing completion of the paperwork required for the capitalisation, and we're confident they'll go through. So those two projects alone account for 33 million of that balance. And so while I won't make a hard commitment in this chamber, we're confident we'll get those across the line by 30th of June, thereby reducing that outstanding figure. But it is really pleasing to see that the work that's been done over the last 6 months with the staff and the focus, that we are starting to see some improvement in that area. Just moving on to the last area, which is our project and program risks. We've identified in this iteration of the report 11 projects that have got a risk associated with them. 8 classified as orange, 3 at red. Just look, as a high level, I won't go into the detail of each individual project, but look, generally the two risks that drive the projects being reported here are either timing, and that timing manifests itself through the deferral number, or cost. And again, cost because of the current economic environment we're talking at, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Just to be crystal, the 3 red projects are are all in the Peacock growth cell area, and these specifically talk to cost escalation risks. And elected members will recall during their draft annual plan there was a substantial budget increase in this area to cover about 18.1 million to cover the cost increase for this project. But again, we're keeping it at red because we really want to keep a focus on this area. In terms of the portfolio risks, I've talked briefly about both of them, but I'll just a little bit more detail. So we've got COVID, and by COVID in this case, we don't mean cost increases per se. We really do mean the impact we're starting to see through a little bit of a hold up in the market as staff are having to isolate. Again, I said either internal staff, contractors, consultancy, under the isolation rules set by central government, and that is starting to just slow things down, and we are starting to feel that a little bit in terms of the progress that we're making out there. The other one is general cost escalation. Look, I think it'd be fair to say that we're all aware, if we're reading general media, that the economic conditions continue to be incredibly challenging around inflation, around cost escalation, around supply chain issues. So council staff will clearly want to continue to monitor this and really understand what's going on in that space. I'll just remind councillors that there was quite a lot of debate during draft annual plan, and that culminated with councillors adopting a 7% increase on those projects identified as having a high risk profile across next year and the year after, which added approximately 10.6 and 9.7 million to the budget as a reaction to the current market. But I don't think it'd be fair to say that it's going to go away quickly, and it's just something I think we need to be very aware of. And with the 6-weekly cycle of reporting to this committee, we have the ability to come back to you very promptly if we are starting to see anything that needs your immediate attention. So I think on that note, I will assume the rest of the report is as read, and I'm happy to take any questions. And
Thank you, Councillor. We'll call for questions, and I have questions on the board. Councillor Ryan first.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's just a simple question, really, and probably with your support too, possibly, Chair. But just in the, you know how all reports have the 4 well-beings?
yes.
And at the end of the report, you touch on the 4 well-beings. It's all pretty straightforward. But I just wonder if, when it comes to the economic one, I mean, this is one of the most significant economic enablers of our organisation, and it's just got sort of 1.5 lines, grow and generate employment and wealth. I wonder if you could potentially just drop in there, because you've got the capital deployment year to date in the report, but I wonder if you could just have a year to date figure in there and or a monthly, just so we get a sense of, and without making it bigger than Ben-Hur, X amount was deployed locally, or what, just a snapshot, so we get a sense of our impact on a monthly basis across our local economy. That would be quite a useful stat, because we're one of the biggest economic engines in the city, effectively.
No, look, genuinely, thank you for raising that. I think you've raised a really good point, so I'll make a note here that we'll look to enhance that section of the report going forward and cover some of those issues for you.
Yeah, and I know, the other one I was going to raise was procurement, but you've started to pick that up in social, because obviously we've just done some work in that space and ratified it last week. So, yeah. No,
that's excellent. It was quite funny. Sorry, just on an unrelated note, I was working with my reporter yesterday on the 3 water stimulus, and we were looking at the part of the report covers the amount of benefit to the local economy from the amount of work that's been done through that water stimulus program, and it's quite a high percentage. So, does that talk to the sort of thing you're thinking about, Councillor Ryan? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. My question was just in regard to those projects identified with cost risk, particularly for Peacock, and that had already been flagged for us when we were having our annual plan discussions. Has anything changed since then in terms of those cost risks, and have we responded adequately through the annual plan to address them?
No, nothing has changed per se. As I said, and as you confirmed, look, the council did react to that through the proposal to increase that budget because we're aware of the cost escalations, particularly within the clauses of that contract. Nothing has changed, but we continue to be in a very dynamic economic environment, and rather than say it's been dealt with and then take it off the table, we'd prefer it stayed here and just had some visibility so that we're looking after it. But there's been no change since a draft annual plan.
Cool.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah. I can't see any other questions. I've got a couple of questions, Ian, that I would like to pose. First one is around the deferrals. At the last finance meeting and for the purposes of the annual plan, we were sort of working on about 90 million being the estimated deferral. That seems to have, in the space of a couple of months, moved to 140 million, possibly higher than that. That's about 43% of our capital spend for this year. And while I know that there are valid reasons why we've got a significant amount, are there some consequences that we should be aware of? And I'm thinking here, is there a legal risk that we might not have, for example, infrastructure available as a developer's ready to open up sections? Have we got issues around the promises that we made to our residents when we signed off the long-term plan that we were going to deliver $308 million? And we're now potentially $140 million short. You know, and the roll-on effect is, you know, can we catch those up within that 3-year bag that Chris's team manages for us? And if not, is there a chance that we won't deliver at all on some projects?
Look, I think I'll...
Sorry, there's a bit in there, Chris, but I was really just trying to give you some examples I could think of, but there may be others that I haven't.
Yeah, look, I'll pick up the answer to that. I think as a general statement, I would say that a lot of our deferrals are about getting the cash timing right, and we're actually delivering the projects with a few exceptions. So, for instance, I think a good report for councillors to look at is some of the attachment to this report. If councillors went to page 20 as an example, so that the nature of the reports that we're putting up there I'm looking at page 20 is the Central City program, and what we've tried to capture in that front page, in the top section there, is what are the key goals for our key projects in a 3-year period that we're trying to achieve, so we can track it on an outcome sort of basis rather than the cash flow. And then we've further gone down to the bottom. You see a little table there that says these are the milestones for each project that we wanted to achieve this financial year. And we've got a little traffic signal there to say green, yep, we're going to achieve what we set out to achieve. The cash flow might be different, but the outcome has been achieved. So that, for each of the programs, that's a really good table to go to. So, you know, on that page I'm looking at 20 there, you can see that we're actually on track for doing what we said with all the work around the regional theatre and just having designs ready. There's a big year next year as we're starting to implement some of these things as the regional theatre is building momentum. You can see that we're now on, track for the municipal pool demolition design underway. You know, so that was the milestone, to have the design underway for the municipal pool, which is underway. The two oranges are starting to flag risk. You know, one around the Tristram-Collingwood intersection, you know, which has been the subject of council meetings and trying to just understand the scope of that project, and then the Central City River Bridge. So I just wanted to draw councillors' attention to those reports because they're really good reports to look at the outcomes. So my view is that in general we are achieving the outcomes that we intended to do. Probably the next point I'll make is that when we came to you with the annual plan back in March, we had a big discussion about deferrals, and we had quite a large program for 22-23, and we said to you that when we came back in May, we would have had a look at that program and looked at the deliverability and and deal with the deferrals up front before you lock in your annual plan. So we've done a lot of work now across the business looking at those programs, and when we come back in May with the annual plan, you'll see a different number, which is a lot more realistic in terms of, in this environment, what we think we can deliver for 22, 23.
It's May now, though.
But for the next year, for the next annual plan. So we got deferrals this year, but if you recall our annual plan, we were looking at a program that was over $400 million. You know, and that seemed to councillors to be a stretch, and it seemed to us to be a bit of a stretch. So we put a lot of work into that to look at that cash flow, and we signalled that we would, when we came back, would have a more realistic cash flow. So you'll see a number that's just over $300 million, and we think that is achievable in this environment to deliver next year.
So what happens to the 140 though that we've deferred? We're obviously not going to. Don't use the word recoup. We're not going to catch up, are we, next year in terms of 22-23 in terms of what the long-term capex budget is and the 140 or a substantial part of it that we have not achieved this year?
Yeah, the work that comes in to May will have taken account of all of the deferrals up until this meeting that we're flagging. So if there's any more deferrals from this meeting to the end of the year, they won't be taken into account in our thinking. But the work we've done looks at the deferrals that we're signalling today, plus the LTP program for next year, plus all of the projects that council added to it, etc. So it's looking at that whole gambit, I think, and what's deliverable across all of those things.
So you're confident then that we will catch up? I mean, confident in the sense that if the market allows us to, we will catch up on what's been left behind?
Yes, as I say, I think we are delivering our programs of work. It's just the cash flow. So, yeah, I'm as confident as I can be, but just recognising that we still are in a very volatile environment. I heard yesterday that NZTA put out a large project and they had no tenders respond to that. So that's a worrying sign for me about the environment we're moving into, and it's a bit hard for us to predict until we go and test the market. For us, we've had a healthy market right up until this point, but that's a bit of a sign to me, you know, that times are getting tough out there with availability of resources.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'll move on. Another question I've got is around the Peacock project and the cost risks that have been identified in paragraph 55 to 57. And are we getting to a point with Peacock that perhaps we need to get from staff a macro view on in terms of how the Peacock, the business case that we signed off in, I think it was June 2018, how we're tracking with that business case in terms of both timing and cost?
Yeah.
And I know that there's been a huge number of events that have happened since then, including this inflation curveball.
Yeah.
You know, there must come a point at where we might just need to have a bit of a macro view over the whole of the project, if you like, and what its affordability still is in terms of the HIF loan and what other borrowings we might need to do.
Can I just reassure councillors, Peacocks as a program is in very, very good shape. I think just for a point of clarity, that one is shown as red because council still hasn't adopted its 10-year plan with the escalation that you've got in there. So as soon as you adopt that, that's a council decision and it'll change that risk profile. So that's the only reason that those are in red at the moment, requiring council action. But across, the contracts that we've let with that escalation are in really good shape. They are, subject to the environment we're working in, like all of our projects. We've got a big contract on the market at the moment for East-West, and that's the last unknown. But in general, the Peacocks program has been managed very well within budget, ahead of time. So that I don't. We would flag to you in this report if there's anything.
Okay, thank you. I see I've got some more questions on the board. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Chris, I listened really hard to your answer to Chair Rob's question regarding the 140 million in deferrals. And I think his question was, will they happen and when will they happen? And I still don't have a clear understanding of that answer.
You'll get clarity in the annual plan when you see the adjusted program that we've looked at. So we've looked across a number of years and looked at a more realistic cash flow for some of the projects. It's a difficult question to give one answer to, Councillor Ewan.
So I think, thank you. So I think what you're saying is we haven't made that decision. We've deferred $140 million worth of projects, and we're going to thrash it out at the next annual plan cycle. Is that what you're saying?
So for this annual plan cycle, in some regard, you have thrashed it out a little bit. The number for your capital program that was identified for 22-23, which is the next annual plan we're working into, was quite a large number. But we've done some work to be more realistic on that number and what we can deliver. So you'll see that at the annual plan when you see the work that we bring back to you.
Is that in June?
It's in May, I think.
Later this month, yeah.
And just remind me, did we decide to add any inflationary increase to the figures that we've deferred?
Not to my knowledge, Councillor Wilson. I think that got raised at the previous meeting, and while historically we have not, because economic conditions have been reasonably stable with a low rate, I think we are at a stage now where we would want to look at those projects being deferred and then understand if the budget quantum is still adequate to deliver. Keeping in mind, most deferrals are projects that are already underway. And it really is a timing adjustment. It's not something that hasn't started. The bulk of them actually are in progress as at now. They're just not going to complete this financial year as we had originally intended.
Oh, great. So the 140 million of deferrals are in fact projects that we've started.
So, I won't say 100%, but substantially a lot of them are projects, and this is what Chris talked about, cash flowing, as in when we're actually spending the money. A lot of those projects are in progress, they've happened, they won't complete by that arbitrary, or they won't reach the point we thought by that arbitrary 30th of June deadline for the year end. Okay, and so they move on to allow completion.
Okay, well that's really helpful. Could you explain to me how much of the 140 million is in that category? That these are projects that we've started and are simply a timing issue of cash flow?
I would love off the top of my head to do that for you, Councillor Wilson. I cannot do that in this forum, but we could certainly do that. We could get a table together for you, because again, just to come back, so there's quite an extensive list of deferrals at a project level that sit in the attachments 3 and 4, and we could certainly add some value to that would help you understand the status of those in terms of where they are. Would that? So, but I'm sorry, I would just be.
Thank you.
Can I just, so councillors, every meeting we identify project by project of what the deferrals are in front of you for this meeting. So listening to Councillor Ewan, I think we will go away, and I think you're looking for, for the cumulative list and categorised a little bit. So I think we can do something a lot better, and we will do that and try and have that for the annual plan meeting later this month.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question? I spent a number of years on the board of the DHB, and they had a budgeting and accounting system that set a budget, and that budget was locked for the 12-month, and so that when there was deferrals or financial decisions made throughout that year, they stood out as where the current budgeting system we seem to use seemed to readdress the budget every month. Maybe I'm not articulating that because I'm not a chartered accountant, but do we operate slightly different to some organisations in the way that we address our budget? Because I found with the DHB ones, I could look at it and immediately I could say, oh gosh, we said we were doing that, but in fact, it's really clear we overspent here, we underspent here, and it was just something you could visually see every time. Where I look at our finances and I go, I'm not quite sure what it's telling me. And I listen to GMs explain, and I'm average intelligence, and I walk away going, I'm not quite sure what he's just told me. So is this the standard way that an organisation would manage its budget?
Look, sorry, without giving you my personal history, Councillor Wilson, I've been here for 35 years, so I don't have a lot of experience outside of Hamilton City Council. What I can tell you is that, that table in attachment 2 and again in attachments 3 and 4, the intent of those, even though they are very numerical, the intent of those is to give councillors a feel for how we started an approved budget, whether it be from the annual plan or the LTP, and how we move from that point to the point we are today. And while we have changes, whether they be we're asking for a deferral of projects, potentially we're asking for budgets to come forward as a circumstance, we're making changes as a result of council resolutions or other factors. And so it's understanding how we move from this point to that point. And what I'm hearing now is, as much as I think we might be giving you quite a lot of detail here to help you understand it, I'm listening to you, I'm thinking maybe we're not doing the good job we could be doing.
Through the Chair, if I can just add, I'll be very clear. We have a budget that's locked in stone. Any changes going forward is a change in the forecast of what we think we're going to do. The budget is the map. The budget is in stone and doesn't change. So all we're doing, or should be doing for governance, is identifying variances to that budget under the label of this is our current forecast, because now we know things that we didn't know when we set the budget.
Thank you. Thanks for your 35 years.
No, it's all right. The other point I was going to...
contribution.
The other
3 life sentences.
Well, maybe I shouldn't have told you that. Look, the other thing I was going to say, and I think it might be important, is it's important to understand too that, look, I think Councillor made a really bold decision a couple of years ago that we're managing the renewal and compliance program as a 3-year rolling program. So we've taken away those arbitrary barriers being the 30th of June every year, and we're actually asking you to say, hey, look, it's a 3-year program, it's a dynamic program, it's a complex program, and to do it that way, and then measure us based on the outcomes of the program at the end of the 3 years, as opposed to where we may have arrived at a particular point in time, i.e. the 30th of June every year. So I just, and I think that's been working really well in that compliance and the renewal and compliance program, being able to manage it on that rolling program basis.
Right. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Councillor Ewan. Before I go to Councillor Dave, just a clarification question to Ewan's earlier question and the response. In terms of projects that have already been started but won't be completed by the end of the year, being included in that 140 million, I assume that if the project has already consumed $10 million worth of spend, that spend is shown in the spent part.
Yeah, well, 100%, yes.
Yeah, so it could be, if it's a 15 million contract, it could only be 5 million that won't be finished before the end of the year. That's in that deferral category.
Yeah, 100%, Councillor Pascoe, yes.
Okay,
and I'm
okay,
thinking,
yeah.
listening, that maybe we need to do a better
That's the
job.
way I would have assumed, but...
Yeah, 100%, yes.
I suspect that maybe there's also that view that there's $140 million worth of projects that haven't even been started yet, that we expected to start and finish. Okay, Councillor Dave.
Yeah, thanks. I've got two questions from items on page 17. I'll start with the first one, and it's probably to Chris, I guess, one of his staff, Ian, but number 60, the Tower Cycleway extension. I just want to, that doesn't give me any sense of when it's actually likely to finish. The reason I'm asking, I've had two people raise it with me just in the last few days, the fact that you can cycle from the Waipa boundary, if not the Waikato boundary, down to Cambridge, and that, but you can't come back up to the city because our bit hasn't been finished. Now, my memory of the approvals that were given, I don't know if it was last LT, I think it was the LTP before, was that we had designed it all so that the whole lot could be built seamlessly in one continuous thing and be finished at the same time. So I was a bit perplexed when I hear those people complaining, including, well, not complaining, raising with me, including the mayor of an adjoining council, and to see this in here, which says there's a sort of an unknown timing risk.
Yep. Can I pick that up? I know quite a lot about this one because I've been biking the whole route quite a bit with my battery.
What do you do in the middle bit where there's no cycleway?
And I last week I walked the whole section just to get an understanding of this because of some of the unknowns. So the first thing I would say is that we're very close to completing. We have some contractual problems. It's been a really difficult contract for us to work through. But if you don't know the trail, look, the trail is now, I'll work backwards from the Advantage Drome and Karapiro, so it's all complete now all the way through to the Tamahiri village. So the Waipa section from the Advantage Drome to Hooker Road opened about a month ago, and it's absolutely stunning to drive that. It's really good. The NZTA opened the State Highway 121 underpass about 3 weeks ago. So you can go through the Tamahiri, you can go through on the side where the markets are, and under the underpass, under the airport road, State Highway 21 now, right through to the Tamahiri village. And then the path is all the way along Newell's Road to Riverglade and ready to go. So if you go down Riverglade, and that's the Waikato District Council section, and the crossing of the Manganua stream. So the bridge and the structure is all largely complete in there, all the way through to our Hamilton section. So the bridge is ready to go, but it needs to join up to the path to Hammond Gully. So we're not far away from completing that, and I can tell you it's stunning. It's going to be one of the most stunning bits of the whole cycleway with the structures and through the bush. And it really, I didn't realise just how difficult the country was in terms of just carving the cycle track into the bank through the bush and everything. So it is really going to be stunning when it does open. You then go through Hammond Park. There's a dismount section through Hammond Park, and then we've got a big structure then that goes up to our roading network in Howes Avenue. So we do have a quality issue that we're just working through with that structure at the moment, but hopefully we can get through that. So in terms of completion, the contractor promised me 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago. My assessment was more likely to be 4 weeks. So I think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will have the section opened. My understanding is the Trust is looking for an opening to align with Gourmet in the Park or something like that. I think there's something at the beginning of summer they're looking to open it up. But we're not far away, Councillor.
I can sense your engineer's enthusiasm for the construction work there, Chris.
Oh, when I say stunning, some people will say because it's going through bush. I'm saying because of the timber structures that you're looking through. They are quite stunning bits of engineering.
So just in terms of the report and the words timing risk, which we often use, might be handy to flesh that, what the timing issues are, you know, and not, you've helped now, that's fine.
Yeah.
But when we do reports like this, to give people, so they don't have to ask questions in meetings?
Yeah, my issue has just been the contractual risk and understanding, you know, when that contractor will finish. It's been just really, really hard for the team to get a program out of them, which is why I ended up on site and meeting with the owner just to understand it myself.
Thanks. The other one may also be yours, just above it, number 58, the Rotuna Village Transport and Open Spaces, the extension of Tuakina Rise, the issue. We've been hearing for about 18 months now about the problem with the resource consent and the open drain versus the closed drain and all of that sort of thing. There, it's starting to, we're talking about the buildings and that being finished in 2 years, at less than 2 years perhaps, in that area. So I'm starting to get concerned about the alignment, because that area includes the turnaround and resting place for the buses that are going to be using the village next door. And if that's not ready at the time, the thing is we're going to have a problem with where do the buses go after, how do they turn around. So I'm not getting a sense that it's all lining up there.
Yep, so what Councillor McPherson is referring to there, we have a problem with the national policy statement on fresh water. So a very late bit of policy that put a different interpretation on farm drains, which has resulted in a real difficulty to get a consent to culvert that farm drain. So look, I've elevated that. We have a position where we think it can be consented. Regional Council don't at the moment. I've elevated it to the Chief Executive for Regional Council, and I have a meeting today at 2 o'clock, in fact, with him and my team just to go over that. So I had a really, really good conversation with Chris McClay on that, so I'm hopeful, Councillor, that we'll find a pathway today through that one.
So is the Chief Executive of the Regional Council aware that one part of his organisation is saying no and the other part is saying we need it now?
He is now, yes.
Excellent. So that he might actually join them together, get them in the same room, bang their heads?
To be fair, I don't think this is a regional council issue. It's the national policy statement on freshwater that was put out with really interpretable wording. So it'd be unfair to say this is a regional council issue. It's a national issue, and up and down the country people have been affected by the imposition of this policy.
Sure. Could we, in the next Finance Committee meeting, maybe get a timeline for, you know, given your latest conversation with the Regional Council, so we know exactly where we stand, and if there is going to be, you know, in your professional opinion, going to be a timing problem?
Yep. Lance can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're proceeding on the basis that we'll crack this. The contract's all been let to do the work. It's a separable portion in there that will have a go live date coming up push the button coming up. So the program's not been, compromised at the moment, but it will be if we can't get a breakthrough with this consent issue.
Okay, so that'll be again in the next report?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dave. Deputy Mayor Jeff.
No, I haven't got a question.
Okay, you're sitting on my request list. That's all right. That's okay. One more question from me, and then I think I can't see any further questions. Just a question on the work in progress. As we're about 6 weeks away from the end of the financial year, have we any indications from Audit New Zealand as to what their stance may be in terms of the current work in progress figure, particularly around the work that the projects that have been completed and are ready to be capitalised, if you like, and appreciated?
Unfortunately, I can't give you a definitive response to that, Councillor Pascoe. I can talk to our finance team and to Audit New Zealand and find out and come back to you on that.
Okay, that would be useful to know so that we're well prepared, because it is a particular area, from my recollection, that Audit New Zealand do focus on as part of their end-of-year audit.
Yeah, it is a key deliverable, and given this next meeting, I don't think is until August. Maybe we'll get a response put together for you and send it through to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. I don't see any further. Sorry, Katie, I don't see you up on the list there. That's all right. Sorry, Jadine.
Sorry for being a newbie. Kia ora tātou. I recognise we don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So with the significant percentage of deferrals that we have across the portfolio and the current dynamic economic environment that we talk about, how concerned are we that when we are in a space whereby those projects are being implemented and delivered, that the economic conditions aren't going to be worse, and we're going to be in a space whereby we've only got a finite amount of money to deliver on a capital program, and there's nothing left? I don't know if I've got my question across, but...
If I understood correctly, and we'll come back to that point, look, as a result, as a rule, deferrals don't have an inflationary factor placed on them. And it probably speaks more to the fact that the deferrals are a timing adjustment, and for the large part they're already in progress, i.e. contracts are already in place, pricing has already have some certainty, and we're moving forward with those. But again, it would be naive to say that would be that would catch everything, and I think that there's a lesson here that we need to have a look at some of those going forward. Again, if there was any budgetary increases that came out through an unexpected, we opened a tender envelope and a price was considerably higher than we thought it would be, and we weren't able to manage that through a scope adjustment or through negotiation with the contractor, that's when we would come back to this committee, making you aware of what the cost implications were of that, and therefore the impact on financial strategy, and ensure that you guys were having, the elected members are having input into that decision before progress was made.
Extent to which the contractors that we've locked in at the moment will still be in a financially sustainable space by the time that we're delivering, in terms of whether our eggs are in one basket.
And again, just to extend on that, yeah, you're right, and I think we need to be aware of that in terms of the pricing we have in there, and that talks to the contract we have in the Peacocks area, which we talked a little bit earlier about, and the increase in that contract document, because it's a long-term contract, it's not something we're building over 12 months, it goes over a number of years, that there's specific cost escalation clauses in there, and of course when you set that, you set it at what you know today, and things change, and that's the reason we've had to come back through the annual plan and ask for that increase to accommodate that. So again, yeah, I think we're aware of it, and yeah, you know.
I know you are.
Yeah.
We don't all have a crystal ball.
Well, yeah,
thank you.
mine's just broken at the moment.
Could I just add to that? Like, your question is a good one, and you know, some contractors we've got on watch for that very reason, you know, and that I mean, it's just a lot of care in terms of payments and risk, but it is a very real issue, and we're aware of it, and we've certainly got our eye on that.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Thanks, Mungai Jadine. No further questions. Councillor Wilson has moved the staff recommendation that the Finance Committee receives the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Is there any debate?
As I've raised in the past, and I'll continue to raise it, I'm concerned by the ongoing occurrence of deferrals, and I'm continue to be highly concerned that we're not adjusting those deferrals in regards to inflationary pressures. I hear the staff's commentary that most of them are projects that have already commenced and will occur. I'm looking forward to more detailed analysis of that, and it needs to be dynamic and it needs to be simple so that we can clearly indicate it. Otherwise, every time staff come to us with deferrals, they need to be able to tell us the time frame in which they intend to complete these tasks and answer the question, do they believe there's inflationary pressures that may alter the quantums involved? And if so, we need to be mindful of that before we approve the deferral. Period.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other debate? Look, I just want to echo Councillor Ewan's comments about this. I think when I first came onto council, our deferrals, or what were then called, I think, carryovers, were about 10% of our annual CapEx spend, and in those days, the CapEx spend was less than 100 million a year. So it was it created significant debate, but it was well short of the 140 million, which is 43% that we're looking at in terms of this year. So while I understand that there are jobs in progress and look forward to receiving the detail on that, and I can quite understand particularly with COVID, that continual deferral of getting progress on some of the contracts with illness and supply issues. I'd also be a little bit concerned about the level of contracts that haven't been started, because I think in that category we have contracts that may have new prices that are well in excess of what we've previously budgeted. And that's a real worry. Not only will there be the inflation factor in there, but if we're already short in the number of contractors available to do the work, that will in itself create a price upwards demand. And I think Chris's red flag about the Waka Kotahi contract not having any contractors tendering for it is a real stark reminder of what may lay ahead in this particular industry going forward. So, but look, let's look on the positive side. I know that we've got a very, very good, competent team of engineers and accountants sitting on the capital team, and I'm absolutely certain that we're going to get some good and timely feedback from them as the market situation proceeds. I'll use the word proceeds because I hope it is proceeding in a positive path and not a negative one. So we now go to the vote. Those in favour, raise your hand. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to the next report, which is the Financial Performance and Strategy Report. And I was looking to see if Tracy is here. Tracy is recovering from the illness. So welcome, Tracy. We won't work you too hard today. David's sitting here right next to me, and I'll just give him a nudge if we can't hear what you're saying and your voice disappears. So good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Chair Rob, and good morning, everybody. So I'm presenting to you the March 2022 results this morning. So the accounting result year to date in March was similar to what we were reporting in the last Finance Committee, and we remain at a favourable result. So year to date actual, we're at 113.4 million, which is $5.3 million favourable against our budget. From a year to date perspective, we're also still reporting a favourable variance for our balancing the books result. And year to date, we are currently at $6.2 million ahead of budget. From a forecasting perspective, you'll see in paragraph 21 of our report that we're showing a forecasting final year to date result of 147 million, which actually from our accounting result is $64.4 million ahead for the year. So while that accounting year to date result looks favourable, you will see, however, that our balancing the books result does go into deficit. So since the last report, and you heard me mention this at the last committee, we've spent quite a bit of time with the organisation going through what our budgeted spend is going to be and what our work programs are for the end of the year. So what we've done to get to the June balance, what it does is take into consideration where we are year to date. So a lot of the work programs that we haven't been able to do, in some cases we won't be able to catch those up. However, in a lot of cases, the team are trying to do as much of to complete the year as much of the work program as we can. So the difference between those balancing the books results that we've been talking about, a lot of it actually is around our maintenance and our and transportation and our painting. And in our personnel area, you'll also see that we are favourable in the transportation space of $1 million. What that particular one is just timing of our recruitment. So at the moment, we've only got 3 vacancies left in that transportation area. However, obviously because of timing and then the time it's taken to get and fill those vacancies, we haven't been able to spend the money as we anticipated for this particular year. The other thing that is having an effect on that balancing the books result, as you just heard from Ian in the capital report, is the team have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes in the capital deferral space, and they've done it on individual projects. So what that means is we now understand a lot more what the operating effects of those deferrals has for this particular year as well. So we've taken that into consideration to meet that forecast. So again, just a reminder that while we are forecasting some favourability in some areas, the team will continue to work really hard to meet the work programs that we had anticipated to do by the end of the year. So the other, the other area I just wanted to talk about today from an overall forecasting perspective is around our accounting results. So obviously a big chunk of that, as I mentioned last time, is the gains on loss for the ring road that we're not doing, so that comes out. Another big piece is obviously the theatre grant as well that we are putting through to next year. So the capital revenue though, so again capital revenue, while that it is now looking quite unfavourable from a forecasting perspective, again that just means we're not receiving money for capital projects, but it also means we're not spending the money in the capital project. So again, from a cash perspective, it's kind of a bit neutral. Vested assets, you'll also see we're forecasting for that to not meet budget again this year. So vested assets again isn't a cash item. It's basically just an accounting entry for us to be able to take those assets from our developers and put them on our books. So all that's saying is that we're not receiving as many vested assets as what we'd anticipated. The big area probably that we need to look at is our DC revenue. So you'll see that our DC revenue is tracking quite significantly behind our budget, and it's been lower in all our quarters, especially compared to the last 2 financial years. So while talking to the team, apparently the principal reason is to do with the industrial sector. So DC revenue is down 57% compared to last year. So Hamilton's primary greenfield industrial sales, so that's Road is approaching capacity, and development is now slowing down in that particular area. So partly because of the diminishing supply and related to a reduction in the number of large new industrial facilities. So compared to the last few years where there's been quite a strong growth in new warehouses and other industrial buildings in that space. So and economic uncertainty and obviously COVID has been quite a big driver too. So the big future greenfield industrial growth area is Te Rapa North, and that's not online yet. So obviously we're just waiting for that. And then we've got Ruakura Industrial, so that's expected obviously to grow steadily in the coming years. So you will remember though that the last 2 financial years have had quite a bit of significant growth and a lot of cash being pulled through with those DCs in that particular area. So we're just seeing some timing delays in that space for this particular financial year. In paragraph 46, you'll see that we're just back from a Treasury perspective, back in being compliant with our counterparty credit risk that I mentioned last last meeting that we weren't. So again, with all our Treasury policy measures, we're now back on track. So with that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tracy. I've got some questions. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Tracy. Just listening to your commentary on the industrial DCs being down 57%, the way you're putting it, it seems like a sort of a cash flow situation that we're going to, when Rotakoti and Ruakura come on stream, that's going to pick up again. But I've got 2 questions that arise out of that. We knew at the time of our LTP when Rotakoti was going to be available, which wasn't immediate straight away. We knew how development was going at Ruakura. So the question relating to that is, why did we not forecast a dip in industrial DC revenue in the current period ahead of maybe a pickup later on? So that's the first question. The second one, looking out past those 2 growth cells, where's the next industrial development area going to come from that's going to earn us DC revenue? Because I'm not aware of anything else in the city of any size where we can keep that cash flow from that particular area coming. So those 2 points I'd be interested in some commentary on.
Great questions. So I'm not sure if Blair is in the chamber. I can't see him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Blair to the rescue.
Hello, Tracy.
Thank you.
So our next industrial cell is Ruakura, which is coming on stream, and we've already had, we've got about $1.5 to $2 million in the pipeline right now for Ruakura. So as those consents start to come through, Councillor Dave, that will provide revenue over the next couple of 3 years in terms of Ruakura. Just picking up on Tracy's commentary, over the last couple of years, DC revenue has been favourable, and so when DC revenue is projected, the team obviously have to take some forecast modelling assumptions. Some of those development contributions, particularly industrial area, have come earlier than anticipated in the case of Rotakoti. So what we're seeing is last year and the year prior that they were higher, and this year they're tracking lower.
So just on that, we'll home in on that, because you're sort of answering a broader question than what I just asked. If we add everything over the last 2 years, are you saying they're flat lining, or they're following the curve that was predicted, that they were the above the line amount from 2 years ago is cancelling out the below the line amount now, or are we still overall below the line? Because hearing Tracy, that was an alarm bell.
So look, I don't have the breakdown specifically of the budget for industrial or commercial relative to actuals, but what I can say is at an overall level, consistently for the last 3 years we've tracked above budget in total DCs in terms of residential, commercial, industrial. I'd have to go away and get that breakdown within that. But it is obviously as you've rightly picked up, it is a long-term approach for development contributions, and timing is dependent on when consents are issued. But I'd have to go away and look at the specific question you've asked there.
I think we could understand that there'll be a sort of a lumpy income revenue stream from that. It'll depend on even local conditions and even the weather or whatever, developers' appetite and all sorts of things from year to year. but over the, say, a triennium, or at least a 5-year period, you would expect the trend line to follow our budget.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So that's really what I'm after. Are we on average on budget? Is, I guess that arising out of Tracy's.
If I can take that away, Chair, and just ask the team just to provide that information, we can do that outside of this.
Great.
It should be relatively easy, shouldn't it, to go back and look at the last 2 or 3 years and
Yes.
and look at the next 2 years and see how that trend is.
See whether it's a problem or not.
Yes, just see whether this is just a timing difference
Yeah.
in this particular year.
But that's the first half of my question, Mr Chair. The second half said looking ahead of Ruakura and Rotokauri, where industrial cells or sections, where next? Because as we know, getting a new growth cell away, whether it's for industrial or residential, is not something that you do in 12 months' time or in a triennium's time. It can take a couple of trienniums at the minimum, realistically. So what's next after that?
So I think from a residential perspective, the outlook and the information from Greg's team is that looking ahead, there is a number of consents in progress, both in an infill and a greenfield sense across the city. So residential, I think the indications are that whilst there's ups and downs, we're generally tracking in accordance with the model. In terms of commercial industrial, so commercial is obviously a reflection of office and bits and pieces. They're generally tracking to expected levels. Industrial, beyond Ruakura, the only other major area we've identified is Te Rapa North, and that is obviously that plan change process has been deferred to start next year. And then after those two areas, Hamilton doesn't have a defined industrial area. So our DC model will reflect that Ruakura and Te Rapa North are the only remaining two, at this stage, industrial areas. As you all know from Future Proof and Hugs, we will be looking over the next 2 years as to where that next long-term industrial cell should be, maybe, whether that is on the periphery of Hamilton or whether we rely on those areas within the wider metro cell.
Okay.
And that's built into the DC model.
Yeah, thanks. It's good. I was a precursor to Thursday's discussion. I knew that. But so just looking at the way we present the accounts, shouldn't we have a bit more nuanced budgeting exercise? Even if we're getting the average right, the amount we're above or below the line in terms of our budgeting is affected by, 57% drop on expected revenue from industrial DCs. That drops us further below the line in terms of balancing the budget and things. So we don't seem to be getting that nuanced sort of approach so we can see from year to year how we're going.
I wonder whether that's something that I can take up with Tracy, just in terms of how we talk about DCs in the report, because I think, as Tracy has rightfully pointed out, they are something that their capital revenue needs to take a longer term view over. So trying to judge it on a particular year is difficult when, as you say, some years we can track considerably ahead of budget, other years we can fall behind, but you need to look at the overall trends.
When we get into the annual plan and the LTP budgeting discussions, we get given these graphs, you're 12 million below the line, or you're going to be, 1 million above in the next year and things like that, which is a bit of a myth, really, when you're thinking about the way this is being handled. It's almost guesswork, unless we sort of get more refined revenue figures, it seems.
It seems to me one way this could be done is when we have certain trigger points where there are significant changes to the budget within 1 year, and we think that they may be timing differences between years, that maybe we should expand the reporting a little bit more, just to show that the $10 million difference in DCs on page 59 is part of one of those years when the timing difference is hitting in a somewhat different way to the ways that it's hit in the last few years.
Yeah.
So that may be is to be monitoring these accounts to where there are significant differences, and then doing the extra detail around
Yes,
that.
and I think, and I've seen the information my team have provided to Tracy ahead of today, there is a lot of sophisticated modelling and assumptions going on behind the scenes to try and anticipate, or best anticipate, when developers are likely to seek code of compliance or seek what we call Section 223, which is when DCs are triggered. So and again, ultimately we're in the hands of the developers. We're trying to anticipate that. We do obviously have 3 months to run, but it's very hard to ultimately, until those money comes in. So I'm happy to have that conversation, Tracy, offline to see what else we can do to enhance the report.
Yeah,
through
it
the
might
chair.
be, as the chair says, just a reporting, homing in on a certain...
Just expanding the
Yeah.
report to show a bit more detail, yeah.
So through the chair, I think it's a good idea to show that running average, Councillor Dave, whether it's part of the capital portfolio, which is the driver of DCs, or whether it's part of this report. I think that would be a good picture. Just for avoidance of doubt, anything that's related to DCs is not included in the balancing the books, as you will all know. But it is included in our total operating income statement.
Thank you, David.
Thanks.
I've got Councillor Ryan and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Just one maybe slightly wide question, but it was sort of looped in with Councillor Dave's question to Blair. Regarding industrial land, if I could just ask one quick question, does this need show the importance, Blair, for the strategic land agreement with like Waipa and the airport industrial piece needing to come crystallise faster?
Well, look, I think it shows the importance of supporting the likes of the Waipa the plan change that Waipa will be considering for the airport land, as that land is an important part of the metro offering of industrial land. From a Hamilton perspective, it also places importance on the work that we'll do over the next 2 years to look at where is our next future industrial land supply in the periphery of Hamilton going to be. Are we comfortable that it is the likes of Hototu, Hautapu Airport, or do we also see another greenfield location on the periphery of Hamilton that may be in that medium long term to provide additional supply?
So that was a yes.
Yeah, but yes with context.
Thank you. I like the short answers.
And also just following on the previous question in terms of DCs and timings, you touched on the 223, was it? 223. And the milestones, because there's 3 milestones which can trigger DC deployment. Have we got intel that would suggest, X amount of developers, there's this latent supply that are about to come through the pipeline?
Yes.
So I just wonder, with respect to the financials, we're only looking at the 2 dimensions, but, if we had that as a key data point saying, there's 10 million of DCs likely to be triggered in the next 90 days, it just gives us the context of pipeline that's related. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Thanks.
You've got 3 words in.
One more question. Blair's a quick study.
Blair's answers are too quick for you.
Here's a quick study. And also probably a question for Tracy, just on the the balancing the books, a year to date is sitting at 6 million favourable, but in 90 days it's 6 million unfavourable. So we've got this 12 million. What's the trigger there in 90 days to create such a variation?
Great question. So we actually budget to spend a lot, surprisingly, in the last couple of months of the year. So a lot of our maintenance work and those sorts of things coming in. And also from a cash flow perspective, because it's year end for quite a lot of people around, everyone likes to put their invoices in at the last minute. So we know that that's what happens. It's a reality type situation. So that's how when we're obviously we have a year budget and we try and split it up between the months of when we expect those things to happen. And we know that that's what will happen. And when we get closer to the end of the year, when we're also obviously following up and doing more of our admin work around purchase orders that have been opened and making sure we get all the invoices in and things like that. So it's what's happened every year over the last since I've been here anyway. So.
Thanks, and I guess we'll have a closer, nuanced response with finance in 6 weeks anyway, so.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Deputy Mayor, Jeff.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, I don't want to keep beating on a dead horse, but I'm going to, if I may. In terms of the industrial land side of things, with Ruakura is obviously an option, but Ruakura is not going to suit everybody for various reasons. And are staff satisfied that we are being urgent enough in terms of future provision for industrial land? Because, this city has run out of that in the past, and I'm a little bit concerned. So this may be something that carries over to the strategic committee on Thursday, I guess, but I'm a little concerned. So I just want reassurance that staff are too.
Without having the discussion that possibly may occur on Thursday, Councillor Jeff, that's why we've indicated over the next 2 years we want to work alongside Futureproof to look at that future industrial land supply, to look at that medium long-term pipeline. So absolutely, Ruakura is the major offering now, but we wanted to think beyond that. So share your question and share your desire to have a medium long-term direction.
Okay, and supplementary question, a bit similar to Councillor Hamilton's. Doesn't that mean we really need to get on and sign this agreement with Waipawa District Council in terms of land transfer? And that's been hanging around a while. So doesn't that really put some urgency on us to get that signed?
And the intention is that will come to a Strategic Growth Committee prior to this triennium concluding. So there is a meeting with Waipawa 2 or 3 weeks out at a governance level, and then it will come to the meeting, I think July meeting at this stage. What I would note, Councillor Jeff, is that we have obviously the airport major industrial land block, which will be coming through a private plan change to Waipawa District Council shortly. That will provide a substantial boost to industrial land in the periphery of Hamilton.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. Question from Councillor Maxine.
And Blair, probably for you too, with regard to DCs. The report also talks about a slowdown in infill development applications. With the potential changes in the DP and a government's bill around housing intensification, might we expect that to increase and take up a bit of that gap? I can understand that there's a bit of a slowdown waiting for that to come through, and might we expect that will be increasing again?
Simple answer is yes, but there's many variables in play at the moment, and some of that slowdown is just in reference to the wider supply channels and I guess economic uncertainty with interest rates and bits and pieces. But the number of, I guess, consents in the system and in the pipeline for the next sort of 18 months, the team is still saying that there's a very strong revenue profile looking out into the future. So both across greenfield and brownfield infill growth.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Maxine. I don't see any further questions. One last question from me, Tracy. Given that this report is to March, which is about 6 weeks ago, are you seeing the operating revenue on council activities, which of course has been in a loss for the year to date, are you seeing that starting to return to budgeted expectations following the end of the lockdowns and so forth?
No, so obviously we've only just finishing off the April results, and we were still with the COVID and the shutdowns and things like that. Hence why the forecast is moved quite substantially to be less favourable in that space. So we were for a long time, obviously with our visitor destinations and events, they were being offset a lot by and the growth, basically the growth business. And that's not, as we go through to the end of the year, that's not sustainable anymore. So unfortunately, and as you know, we are still with those COVID, COVID things that are happening with the business and with staff and things like that. So
right, okay. So your predictions to the end of the year include the lower revenue expectations continuing right through to the end of June?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, well, there are no further questions on the board. I will move the staff recommendation, which is on page 49. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Maxine. Debate. I'll just start off with a very quick comment, and that's about the discussion that we've had around the DCs this morning. If you look at that column on page 59, where we've got capital revenue, you'll see when you bring in vested assets, we're about 31, the expectation is for the year that will be about $31 million behind what we budgeted for. And bearing in mind that some of that may be the effects of timing differences, I am reminded in 2008 and 2009 when Council was seeing similar drops in this particular area and signalling in the potential for a recession, and of course we did get a significant recession after that, that we might be seeing a slowdown in the economy, which we have got very little and or no control over. So we need also, and that's why I think getting that trend statement, Blair, of DCs will be useful, but we may also need to suggest that there could be a red flag out there that developers may stop releasing sections, even if they're there. And the suggestion is the industrial ones may not be at the moment, but even if the sections are there, they may stop releasing them because of the changes in the market, in which case there will be an adverse effect on us, not only in terms of this capital revenue, but also in terms of our ability to deliver our CapEx program. So we need to be mindful of that as being a potential risk going forward. And let's hope that it's not as bad as the recession that followed 2008 and 2009, which we all remember lasted about 4 years. So that's my comment. Councillor Dave.
Thanks, Mr Chair. You've touched on a couple of points there in relation to the economic, potential economic slowdown that you're referring to. There are some different, I would say that there's some different circumstances in play here that weren't then, and one of the big ones is the shift of business and industrial areas south from Auckland here because of the relocation south of the Bombays, not just to Hamilton but also other areas in the basically from Waipa northwards. There's a shortage of land and a shortage of affordable land in Auckland, which is driving that down this way, which we didn't have in the GFC period. So while there might be a downturn for some reasons, there's also a potential upturn above there. It's all a bit of guesswork, to be honest, though, and I think one of the things that shows us is that we need to have, rather than set hard dates for things to happen in the development area or expectation of revenue area, we need to sort of look at thresholds and be quite nimble in changing, and you mentioned this in questions earlier, at changing our forecasts and changing them quite regularly according to some quite frequent up and down turns in market conditions. The other thing that both Ryan and Jeff raised during the questions is the wider picture of the need for us to have a good look at industrial capacity within Hamilton. I mean, for instance, one of the issues that's come to light just in the discussions here, you've heard about the proposed industrial land at Hamilton Airport. At the moment, that's in Waipa District. Do we want that to be in Waipa District, or do we want it to be in Hamilton City? It raises some questions like that. And even if it doesn't matter, we don't mind which council it's in as long as it happens, how quickly is that going to be available? Because as Jeff said, Ruakura is not going to meet all the demands. It's not going to be suitable for some of the things. So the developments that might be wanting to happen, we're a big enough city now to need more than one industrial area on the go at any one time, and we're sort of running out of that situation at the moment. We must do something quicker than we had planned, I suggest, in that area. That's going a bit broader than this current debate, but I think we need to look at that, and we're certainly going to on Thursday, I hope.
Thank you. No other debaters, so thank you, Councillor Day, for your comments on that. We'll now move to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Right, we'll move into resolution to exclude the public now. Do you want to have a break for 15 minutes?
We definitely need some more morning tea.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, let's move. Let's move into public excluded. I will move. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Mark. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. So let's have a break till 11:10.